Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the 8th edition of the hashtag Slinkythink sessions. Drew Kinchis here. We're going to get started in just a second. Chris is getting his technology set up. But in the meantime, we're going to show you a quick little video about some of the stuff that we do at beLithe, and then we'll get started in exactly 2 minutes.
Most organizations have their hearts in the right place. They want to create a dynamic workplace culture and heighten morale to improve results and increase the bottom line. The problem is, organizational transformations don't magically happen at once. Individuals fuel organizations, but how do you fuel individuals? That's where Agile comes in. Agile is a methodology, a mindset, so to speak, that focuses on continuous improvement, constant iteration, and empowering teams. We're beLithe, an Indianapolis-based training and consulting organization focused on creating happy workplaces and successful businesses through agile methodologies. We provide holistic training, coaching, and consulting in agile development, project management, modern leadership, and more. We believe that good companies build processes, but great companies build people. We exist to empower organizations no matter their level of experience with agile. Is your team continuously struggling to meet expectations? Are you experiencing high turnover or struggling to attract quality talent? Is your organization struggling to grow beyond its current capacities? We can help. Contact beLithe to see how Agile can work for you. Be agile, be empowered, beLithe.
All right, thanks for watching momentarily. A fun little story about how that video came to be. This was actually produced by a woman named Katie French, and she's a student at Ivy Tech. And she actually whipped this video up in about a week and a half, talking about some of the things that we do. So we were so impressed by her school project that we're using it now just to kind of spread the gospel about what we do as an organization. So we were super impressed, and we're really happy that we were able to utilize Katie's efforts there. So Chris is going to start sharing the slides in just a second here. But while we're getting things going, which thanks for your patience. I know it's already 12:05, but we have a great question that we would like for you to answer. If you click on the section that says polling, we have a question that we would like for you to answer just so we all can kind of get to know one another. And the question is, if you had only one song you could listen to for the rest of your life, what would it be? You've got 10 choices here, and you can only pick one of the 10. So choose wisely. And I'm actually, I just realized I didn't launch the poll. There we go. That's going to make it a little bit easier. So now you should be able to see the poll and go ahead and pick the song. If you had to listen to one for the rest of your life, what would that be? Turns out at the end of it, you might not like that song as much as you did to start off with. But sometimes that happens. Okay, so while you all are answering that question, I'll reveal the winner in just a second. Today, we're going to talk about SAFE, Scaled Agile Framework. I'm going to provide you with just a really quick introduction for today's webinar and then hand it over to Chris. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. The session itself will last about 40-45 minutes, and then there'll be time at the end to answer your questions via the Q&A. So the way the Q&A works is if you do have a question throughout the presentation, feel free to drop the question within the Q&A section. So all you have to do is just ask it and then hit a button. And then once we see your question, we will answer it as soon as we can. So the cool thing is if we don't get to answer your question during the webinar today, we will have a list of your questions and we'll reach out and get back to you. So if you have questions, if you're curious, feel free to just ask away. So I'm not going to introduce who we are because that's what that nifty little video was for. So once again, we're beLithe. My name is Drew Kinchis. I'm the creative director. And if you're wondering what beLithe means, lithe is an adjective for agile. So beLithe is really a sentence. Here's the team. We're happy to introduce a couple of new additions since last time we got together. Todd Adams is our agile team coach. And also Karishma Dingra is our Tech Point extern for the summer. And yours truly and Chris, you might know us from some of these previous webinars. And the reason why we're called #Slinkythink is because our logo is a slinky to personify our interest, and that we're just big fans of Agile, and we want to not only talk about it but live it at the same time. So the goal of today's workshop, we're going to dive into the basics of SAFe and how it can empower enterprise agility. We're going to learn about essential SAFe, a starting point for implementing SAFe, and describing the most critical elements needed to realize the majority of the framework's benefits. We're going to discover its underlying principles derived from lean, systems thinking, agile development, product development flow, and DevOps, and how they interact to empower lean enterprises. So a little bit of a wordy description. We promise that you'll get a lot out of today's workshop. So one last housekeeping, as I mentioned earlier, make sure to ask us questions via the Q&A feature within Zoom. Also, if for some reason you're not able to see or hear something, feel free to just write a note within the chat and make sure to ping us and let us know. So without further ado, I am going to let the one, the only, the honorable Chris Daly take it away.
Okay, so welcome everybody. Today we're going to spend some time talking about SAFe. And are you seeing my screen, Drew?
Yeah, I'm seeing your Trello board though.
Oh, cool. It was supposed to, I had PowerPoint up, but I'm not sure exactly what happened there. Okay, so what we're going to cover today is we're going to talk about SAFe. And we're going to talk about specifically as it relates to scaling Agile. And why. So we're going to talk about why we need to change. We're going to talk about what scaling is, what is SAFe, and then we're going to wrap up. Let me start off by saying that SAFe is a huge undertaking to completely learn SAFe. The SPC course is 4 days from 8 to 5 every day, just to in class participating, just to get the SPC high-level view of what SAFe is. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about a little bit about it. We're going to introduce it, and then in subsequent webinars we're going to go through and we'll dive deeper in certain aspects of it. So let's get started. So first of all, I'm making an assumption. I'm assuming that A, because you're in this webinar, you believe in the Agile Manifesto. B, I'm going to assume that you know something about Kanban, Agile, and Scrum, and that you're capable in that you have actually done some Agile. You actually have used it, you've applied it at the team level, and you understand what the challenges are with it. So why do we change? Well, we primarily change because we have to. The world is not static. The world is not going to stay in the same spot. And so we, as participants in society and in this world, have to change. Now, we all may not like change. I think most of us fear the actual change process more than we actually fear the change itself. So, but we're gonna have to do that. The speed of change is accelerating rapidly. Every business, I've got a quote up right now from Dean Leffingwell, who's the creator of SAFe, that every business is a software business now. Think about a business that doesn't have software somewhere at its core, right? If you think about, if we think about pharma, they've got huge server farms that go out and process data and process images to be able to try to better understand their results. Airlines, for example, have have computer systems at the core of what they do. They, if they go down, if something happens and one particular company's maybe one of their own systems goes down, it can take the whole airline down. And we see that manifest itself in canceled airlines, late, things like that. So, again, try to think of a business that isn't software related, and you're gonna be hard pressed, I think, to think of one. And the interesting part is it's only going to get worse. As we continue to mature and as things continue to change, you're going to find that software is going to be at the core of everything you do. I was talking to my lawn care, not provider, but the individual that takes care of my irrigation system. And I was talking to him about a smart irrigation system, which means basically there's a little computer that determines when it's on, when the water goes on and when it goes off. And I can access it via the internet and turn those on and turn those off as need be. Everything is going to move toward some sort of software business. We need, as businesses, we need to be agile. We need to be able to change. We need to be able to adapt to what's going on. We also need to be lean from the standpoint that we need to do it in an effective way. We need to be able to change in a way without adding a lot of cost. We need to eliminate waste. We need to question a lot of what we're doing and make sure that, A, does it still make sense? And if it doesn't make sense, then why are we still doing it? Are we doing it because it's a requirement out of a regulatory body? Are we doing it because somebody says we have to do it? Or are we doing it because that's always the way we've done it? But we need to be challenging that. If we talk about transformational initiatives, organizations, enterprises are expected last year to spend $1.3 trillion in transforming digital initiatives. So whether we're talking about shifting from Agile or from Waterfall and traditional project management to Agile and Scrum, whether we're talking about marketing firms shifting to more of a digital focus, whether we're talking about how a manufacturing plant might go through and transform itself digitally. We're going to spend $1.3 trillion, but yet most organizations don't reach their stated goals. They have very lofty goals, and they're not, they put together a business case, a business plan. They go through, they get their justification, they get approval to go spend the money based on these results, and yet the results are often far from where we originally said they were. And that can be a problem. That creates a black eye, especially for those of us that are in the software business or in the digital space. We said it's going to be X. We said it's going to be $2 million to do this transformation. It ends up being $4 million. They start questioning our judgment. They start not trusting us. And so it's important that we think about that. So how do you ensure, as an organization, how do you ensure that your organization is going to be one of those that succeeds? What do you do to help make sure that happens? Do you provide governance, huge amounts of governance and approvals? Do you document everything out in a very traditional approach? Do you start off with just training everybody and the entire company going Agile all at once, much like Salesforce did? How do you do that? How do you make sure that happens? Well, so let's talk about why we need to scale. So there are a number of reasons on why organizations need to scale. The house is on fire. We're at crisis. We're at a crisis point. We're on the verge of our business becoming obsolete. So therefore, we have to change. Maybe we're getting our butt kicked by a competitor. Maybe they're coming in and they're talking about how maybe they're coming in and beating us on sales, maybe profitability, efficiency, maybe better quality. There's also the We Too movement. Yeah, the we too had to do a double check on that. We too, right? So the we too, that's a pound sign concept I came up with, but we too need to be agile because everybody else is going agile. It's a buzzword, right? It's something that came along that we thought is going to make us cool. It's going to make us look good on our resume. Maybe it's we've got a blowhard consultant told us to, right? Maybe some consultant came in and said, let's, maybe a large scale consulting organization like McKinsey or Gartner or PwC, Accenture, somebody comes in and says, well, you need to be agile. You need to be agile. You need to transform how you're doing stuff. It may be that there's too many dependencies that we have. We right now, everything falls apart because they're all tied together, and because one thing is tied to another, and therefore it's very much like a domino effect, where if one thing stops, then everything stops on downstream. And then maybe, just maybe, and this happens some, not very often, but we have a leadership team that's actually looking forward, that's actually preparing for the future. And so that can be a reason on why they need to scale. They understand that their business is going to grow and that they're going to have more business, and that their existing ways of doing things are not going to work. They're not going to be meaningful in the future. Some of the benefits of scaling are that, from a competitiveness standpoint, right? We're competitive. We're out competing with our competitors. We're going in and we're going in right, following them in right after they get done with their sales pitch. We go in and we're comparing one to the other. A lot of organizations will talk about that as they go in and try and solicit work. I know that some of the work that we've been doing lately, we've been working with an organization that has got an RFP process where they're sending out an RFP and they've got vendors responding, right? Being able to scale and be competitive and talk about how you scale, it can, in many cases, can get you in the door. It can get you into the sales process, can give you a leg up. The agile mindset, right? So one of the benefits, the agile mindset itself of starting to look at value and how do we derive value from what we're doing. When we think about how we collaborate, traditionally we talk about collaboration at the end. We have governance processes, CAB groups, change approval boards that are there to try and catch and make sure that we've all communicated and collaborated prior to something going into production or prior to something being considered done. When in reality, that should be done up front. So that agile mindset helps us from that standpoint. We want to reduce waste. We want to eliminate overhead. We want to eliminate the concept of swim meets at in our company, right? Where we have a meeting that has got 50 people in it and there are 4 people that talk. Right, the rest of the folks are there very much like a swim meet. They're there to watch their 3 minutes of swimming and then they're out. But yet they sit there for an hour. So we want to try and eliminate that waste. We also want to improve transparency. If we could figure out how to be better, how to be more open about what's going on in the organization. What are the decisions we're making? What's the true status of where we're at? That can help us from a business planning standpoint. It helps us from a alignment standpoint. It can improve our quality, and it can also give us, if we scale appropriately, can help us get predictable. We can start planning better because we have a general guideline. We have a general time frame on when things are going to be done. Traditionally we'd wait until the very last day of the project when it was due, and then we would say, hey, we need another month, or we need another 2 months, or we need another 3 months. And so we would, so this learning to scale helps, right? It helps us. And then from a culture standpoint, scaling can improve our culture. It can help us in trying to get it to where accountability and responsibility are a couple of our core themes that we want to make sure go through. we want to eliminate the politics and the infighting. We want to foster teamwork. And from a culture standpoint, once you kind of go through and scale and figure out how to do that, you don't want to work anyplace else. You don't want to work any other way. You don't want to go back into a traditional hierarchical management structure where the boss on the top tells you what to do and everybody just, the bad stuff just flows all the way down through the organization. You start wanting to choose other places to work, right, that are more similar to the way to that good feeling you have. It can be a huge culture draw in terms of benefits for people and where, and recruiting talent and getting and retaining talent by having a culture where people appreciate the scaling and appreciate what you're doing. There are some costs, right? Scaling does have some costs when you try to do that. You'll see a productivity bump downward, where when we start trying to scale, all of a sudden people are going to feel like they're constrained. They're going to feel like that they're slowed down because now I have to talk to other people. I've got too many meetings. There is a time investment in collaboration, which one would expect, right? We're spending more time talking and planning so that we build the right things. We're not getting as much stuff done, even though the stuff we're getting done is more valuable. People tend to view that as a cost. There's tension with change, which is one that is really interesting, right? As we're going through and people are changing, they personally are feeling the tension. They personally are trying to figure out what their role is. And so there can be tension with change, which ultimately can lead to turnover. You're gonna have, if you're trying to scale, you're trying to get better as an organization, you're gonna have people that are gonna leave. You're gonna have people that aren't gonna buy into what you're doing. They don't want to change. So as crazy as this sounds, they're gonna go find another job at another company where essentially they're making a big change. But some people will change, will leave for that reason. And the other thing is scaling can have a cost on the leadership team. The leadership team's got to figure out how it's going to work together. In the past, we have gone off and we've worked and we've done our own thing, and I work in my silo and I do my development, and then I throw it over the wall to the testers, and I go on to the next thing, and the testers, that's their problem to deal with. It's going to cause us some challenges from a leadership standpoint in that we're not going to be able to do that anymore when we're trying to scale. We're going to have to collaborate. We're going to have to work together. We're going to have to just spend time up front talking about what it is we're trying to accomplish. And then participating as we go, as changes need to happen, participating in that change rather than just laying back and moaning and groaning about it. So there are a number of scaling approaches. These are the more prominent ones. There is a Scrum of Scrum, which Scrum Alliance and Scrum.org have been the main proponents of. Nexus, which comes out of Scrum.org. SAFe, or Scaled Agile Framework, which we're here to talk about. There's DAD, which is the Disciplined Agile Delivery, which came from IBM and Scott Ambler and is more geared toward that. It's got more traditional elements, I think, in it than the other ones. And then there's Large Scale Scrum. So of this list of scaling approaches, can anybody guess what percentage of the market or of the implementations SAFe has based on version 1's State of Agile report that just came out, the version 13 that came out?
Go ahead and put your guess in the chat. Go ahead and just put a number down, what you think the percentage is.
What slide number? many? How about total? So what's our answer, Drew?
Okay, it looks like we've got 35, 25, 20, 10, 50, and Chris Daly with a dramatic reveal. What's that number?
It's 30. 30 for safe and 16 for scrum of scrums. That means 46% of the market, 46% of the organizations are using one of those two methods. All of the other methods, and even those that don't use any kind of scaling, are taking up about 56%. That's a huge percentage when you think about it. SAFE is the biggest one at 30%. It's almost twice what Scrum of Scrum is. So SAFE is an important component in the scaling community, in the Agile community in terms of scaling. It is one of those, it's one of those things where it's interesting from the standpoint that when, depending on who you talk to in the Agile community, they're either, they're safe and there's other methods. They're kind of middle of the road, or they're pro-safe, or they're anti-safe. And it's kind of interesting to have those conversations, to get in those conversations and hear people's point of view. We at beLithe have tried very, very hard to take an agnostic view. We believe that there are a number of different ways that you can scale, and that safe certainly fits in some situations. I also believe that Scrum of Scrum fits in other situations, and we've also done some work using a lean and agile program management approach to it as well. And we think those three kind of give you the spectrum of what you need in terms of scaling. You should avoid scaling if at all possible. So if you have an organization that the total development staff is about 15 people, you should not be doing safe. You should not be trying to scale. You should be looking to break your work down so that you can have independent teams that can work on their own with no constraints with each other. The reason you should avoid scaling is it's expensive. The more people you have talking, the more people you have involved in the process, the slower you're going to go by default. When you're scaling, you're going to have to communicate more. You're going to have to communicate at different levels. You're going to have to educate the leadership. You're going to have to educate the people, the laggards in the organization that don't want to move and wish that we were still doing traditional software development. You should try to get visual if you can, right? Get things up on a wall. That can help from a scaling standpoint, right? Make sure they're the right things. Make sure they're current. Don't go through and put something up on, or put something on a dashboard that nobody's going to look at but you. Try to make them relevant. Eliminate dependencies and solve your known problems. One of the challenges a lot of organizations have is that they are so busy trying to get stuff done that they don't have time to fix any of their problems. And so they turn around and rather than fix a problem, they're going to keep incurring technical debt, or they're going to keep incurring inefficiencies in terms of how long it takes to do things. And that it adds up over time. It adds up in terms of duration, it adds up in terms of effort, and it can also add up in terms of credibility and trust. If you're taking too long doing stuff, if you're not solving your known problems, if you're just living with them and whining about them, right, and not following up and correcting them, eventually people turn you off. They quit listening to you. They quit trusting what you say. So solve your known problems. So let's get into SAFE. I've kind of laid the groundwork here. So SAFE stands for the Scaled Agile Framework. It is, you can read the description. It is, and this is straight off the SAFE website, by the way. It is a framework that allows you to be able to scale to large organizations, to go in and get a number of different areas and groups of people together to communicate, collaborate, and get rowing, if you want to use the rowing the boat, get everybody rowing in the same direction at the same time. Some of the key concepts in there, it doesn't matter whether you're using Kanban or Scrum. It embraces lean and agile at its core, and it is promoting DevOps at this point. They just came out with a DevOps training course, and they are really starting to promote that. The thing that I will tell you about SAFE is, and this applies to all scaling technologies or scaling approaches, it doesn't matter what approach you use. If you stink at Scrum and Agile, if your teams aren't good, you don't waste your money trying to scale, because at the end of the day, at the core of SAFE is Scrum and Kanban. And if you can't do that, then in my experience, you're just wasting your money, right? You're just wasting your time. So the SAFE framework really has some core values and some lean competencies, right? So the values are, they want built-in quality. We want to take the time to build it the right way and to do the work the right way. We want to have alignment and transparency. We want the organization, and if we're doing a release train, which is the portfolio level, we want all the teams that are contributing to that release train, we want them to know what everybody else is doing. We want them to have identified any dependencies early and address them as quickly as we can. We want to be aligned from the standpoint that we're all delivering in the same direction with the same objectives and goals. And as well, we want to make sure that we're delivering in the right cadence, that we're all going to be planning on delivering at the same time. That helps us from the standpoint of going that last mile and actually promoting the stuff. We believe in program execution. So from a SAFE standpoint, we want the program to execute in a way that is repeatable, the process is defined, it's understood, and because of that, it's transparent. We want to embrace the lean competencies for an enterprise. So our leadership needs to understand what lean means and what agile means. It doesn't need to be the, hey, just go do it. Hey, it's a framework. Hey, I read Wired magazine. We should go do this stuff. They need to be engaged. They need to be involved. They need to understand what it is. If they don't understand what it is, as with all other scaling technologies, you're not going to be successful, right? If your leadership doesn't get it, they're doing it just because, you're not going to be successful. As part of the SAFE framework, we also want to promote team and technical agility. And because you could almost say ability as well, right? As a team, we want to be able to work together. We need to work together as a team. From a technical standpoint, we need to be agile from the standpoint that we can change and iterate. We also need to be good at our core competencies, and that needs to be our mission. We need to write quality code. We need to do quality work, and it needs to be done the right time, and it needs to be iterative and incremental in how we do it. We want to promote DevOps and release on demand. So we want to be able to release when we want to. We want to be able to put it in production when we want to. And there's a difference between putting it in production and releasing or turning on the functionality. So we need to take that into account. What type of organization do we have? What's our business model? How often are our customers willing to accept change? And then we need to build out our DevOps and our release capabilities around that, right? We don't need to overbuild it. If you're working in a say an FDA regulated system, you probably won't be allowed to release on demand. You're probably going to have to release on some sort of regular cadence. So you don't need to go build all the necessarily all the tooling and all the processes that you would need if you were running an online business. Let's see, you can read the rest of it. Lean portfolio management. So one of the things that I like about SAFe is that it addresses the concept of a portfolio. A lot of organizations struggle with portfolio. They think that because they start projects, that means they're actually doing projects. And they'll tell you that. We've got 27 projects and we got 45 people in IT. Well, how does that work, right? What things are we doing that add value? And are we focusing on that? Are we doing the right things at the right time? Are we doing them for the right reasons? SAFe's lean portfolio management helps in that process. Lean is core to SAFe, and we've talked about one of the concepts that is prevalent throughout the SAFe framework is this concept of the house of lean. So it's made up of it's got a roof of value. Value is its roof, that's its ultimate goal. But then there are 4 main tenets, if you will, that need to be there. So we need to have a respect for the people and the culture. We need to understand that this change is happening and it can be painful, and not everybody's going to like it. Not everybody's going to accept the change as quickly as other people do. We need to be focused on flow, right? We need to be focused on the work flowing through the organization, not having bottlenecks, not sitting to wait for approvals that don't add any value. We want to encourage innovation. We want to create an environment where we can incrementally try things, and if they work, great. If they don't, then we can go ahead and learn from that and innovate. So we want to go back to that concept I keep talking about from time to time. Aim small, miss small. We want to make small innovative changes, see if they work, and then move forward. And we want to relentlessly improve. We want to keep as our core focus, we want to drive home the fact that we want to get rid of the waste. We want to get rid of the things that don't add value. We want to reduce the risk by getting rid of those things that cause variability or cause unpredictability or cause problems for us or just cost too much money. We want to relentlessly improve. But at its foundation is leadership. Again, we talked about this before. Leadership is important when you're scaling and when you're trying to do Agile at scale and have multiple teams. So this is a SAFe solution. I have to admit, there should be a drum roll. I should have had a drum roll here, right? But so this looks a little bit daunting, right? There are 4 levels of in this diagram. There are 4 levels of SAFe. There are 4 different levels within the SAFe framework. Not all these levels are applicable to every organization. Some organizations will only focus at the program level. Others will focus more at the solution level. And then the large organizations, some large organizations, will focus on the portfolio level and how we adopt it. What's interesting, though, is when you start learning about SAFe, you'll understand that SAFe is really, from my vantage point, I haven't really learned anything new in SAFe. As I've been learning and growing and working, I really haven't learned anything new. The SAFe concepts are pretty much out there. They're out there in the public domain. They didn't really create too much that I can tell that's unique. What's unique is their approach of how they put these together, right? And the order that they put them in and how they address their implementation. So what I'm going to do next is we're going to go through and we'll talk about these a little bit. So there are, from the, going back to those layers or those levels of abstraction, right? The first one's a team. So the team is really made up of Kanban and Scrum teams. They coordinate their features across what we call a program or a collection. They ship whatever is done, ships incrementally when the increment is done. So they introduce this concept of a release train. The release train's at the station. As you're getting your work done, the work goes on the release. When it's time for the release to go to production, everything that's done goes. And that's one of the core things about SAFe that makes it somewhat interesting. It gives you the hard and fast deadline of when you've got to get work done. It introduces a sense of urgency to the teams because they know when the work's going. So and when it's planned. So they know how long that large scale increment is. Now that doesn't mean, introducing the concept of a release train doesn't mean that the stuff only goes once a quarter or once every 2 months. The stuff can go whenever, but from a logical standpoint, the concept of the release train is that, right? We want to make sure that we get everything done in this period of time that we said we're going to try to get done. The team cadences are synchronized. So, in Scrum, each team comes up with its own cadence. It could be 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, right? The answer is the team decides. In SAFe, the release train decides when and how often people are going, what that cadence is. Wherever there are dependencies, those have to be coordinated. In Scrum, we just trust that if we're doing Scrum and not doing anything else scaling, we trust that Scrum Master is going to talk to Scrum Master and coordinate, or team's going to talk to team and coordinate those dependencies in that deployment. With SAFe, we're saying, here's the cadence. We establish that up front. At the team level, we still have the 3 traditional roles. We still have the product owner, the Scrum Master, and the team. The thing that they do different, that SAFe does a little bit differently, is rather than calling it Scrum, they call it a sprint, they call it an iteration. They use a little bit of change in terms of the language, but it's really, they use iteration mostly instead of sprint, but basically it's still Scrum. It's still Scrum with a few restrictions on it, or it's still Kanban with a few restrictions. At the program level is where we have the team of teams. When we talk about the similar to the Scrum of Scrums, we have meetings for the product owners and for the Scrum Masters to get together on a somewhat regular basis. Could be, I've seen it done every week. I've seen it done every couple of weeks, where they get together and they talk about where they're at in their progression across the work that their team is doing. Across the program, you have a similar vision, and you have, you talk about support, and we talk about synchronizing, trying to make sure that we're all working together and coordinating together. We have retrospectives, right, which is we do retrospectives at the program level, much like we do in Scrum, right? So we do a retrospective at the end of every release train or the end of every product increment. We go through and we do a retrospective. What did we learn at the program level? What things can we do better? How can we improve? We have roles similar to a Scrum Master, a product owner, and a team. So at the program level, we call those similar roles the release train engineer. We have we use our system architect. We include the architects in engineering, and then we talk about product management versus product owners. So SAFe really, essentially, it ends up being a team of teams, similar to the way you would expect with Scrum. For a large solution, right, which is the next level up, you've got multiple release trains, multiple value streams that are combining into one large solution. So at that level, it's the same thing. It's a team of teams. They focus on what's the solution trying to what's the intent of the solution? What problems are we trying to solve? We coordinate at a large solution level. I mentioned you're coordinating across multiple release trains. You're coordinating multiple groups going together, multiple value streams going together. And at the solution level, you have a solution train engineer, you have a solution architect, you have or architects, you have solution management, you have a supplier, and maybe a customer. You'll notice that in Scrum, we only talk about a product owner, a Scrum master, and a team. At the release, at the program level, at the large solution level, we also have architecture, because we have to make sure that architecturally things are going to fit together well, that the architecture is going to scale, that somebody's taking that larger view. It's very easy for a Scrum team to be so focused on what they're doing that they build something, and they build it in such a way that the architecture won't scale. Whereas on a large solution or on a program team or release train, having those architects helps ensure that we're consistent and we're having the conversations that we need to have across those levels to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the customer. And then there's a portfolio level of abstraction. And what's interesting about, and I mentioned this before, what's interesting about SAFe is that we talk about portfolio. We talk about value streams. We talk about portfolio management and lean enterprise. We start talking about not only what things are we doing, what initiatives are we undertaking, what solutions are we building, but also what's the value in what we're doing? Is this initiative that we're working on more valuable than this other initiative? Where do they rank? And if we're doing a stack rank, if we take a stack rank view, which one, if we could only, as an organization, if we could only do one thing this year, what would be that one thing? If we could only do two, what would be those two? What would two things would we go do? You want to start driving that, because if you don't have that conversation at the upper levels, at the portfolio level, the decision will get made for you at the lower level. If everything is a high priority and has to be done this year, somebody in the organization at some point is going to have to make a decision on what it is, because you haven't defined for them what they're going to do, what they're going to choose to do. So SAFe encourages you to have that conversation, so it's clear throughout the organization what is the number one priority, what's the number two priority, so that when we get down to a developer, or we get down to a team, or we get down to a product manager, they understand already what the priorities are. They understand it, and we can short circuit a lot of the back and forth, the bad decisions, the politics, the hurt feelings, all the stuff that goes with those conversations, because we've already defined what's the most important. We talk about governance. So what kind of governance are we going to put in place? I've been living in governance land for the last few weeks with the customers I'm working with. And governance is one of those subjects that's very, very touchy. It's very, very difficult for them to let go of their change control boards and the approval processes. And we've got to have a business case. I've seen organizations where they put together a business case for an initiative that might take them 80 or 100 hours. They spend more time doing the business case than they spend actually doing the work. You know, if we do the governance at the right level throughout the throughout our organization, then it makes it easy. We eliminate the politics. We use a set of criteria. Everybody understands why we're doing what we're doing, and what order we should be doing them in. We have, at the portfolio level, we have epic owners, which again are, basically the servant leaders that try and help drive the ownership, drive the conversation about the value. We have enterprise architects, and then we have the lean portfolio management. So as with all things, right? Originally, SAFe was pitched as going to be the thing that solved world hunger, and no more wars, and global warming was going to stop, right? And it's typical on a new product, right? It's typical on a new approach. And I'm not saying SAFe did that, but I'm saying that some people are just, SAFe will fix any problems they've got. SAFe has its pros and cons, right? It's expensive. It's expensive up front because you train everybody. Everybody in your organization gets at least 2 days worth of training. In some cases, they get a lot more than that. It can, to some folks, the oversight and governance and planning that's required in SAFE are unnecessary. So it can create some conversations. Because of the approach that we take with SAFE, it can remove developers from actually talking to customers at some points, right? You can, with the different levels of abstraction, we can move developers further and further away from the actual customers. We can get lost. The teams can get lost because they don't work on the big picture. They're working on one little small piece. They may not understand how they fit and how they work. It does, however, the pros are that it helps maintain some centralized decision making at the enterprise level. So the organization itself is making some decisions from a top-down approach. It does take into account, the large complex problems that we have and solutions. It gives you a bigger picture. It can be more efficient than traditional project approaches. Not saying it's the most efficient, but it can be more efficient than what we're doing today. It facilitates better coordination across teams, and it ensures top-down alignment. The thing I would just throw in here as to kind of summarize my feelings of it, I've seen SAFE actually pull in people into the conversation about what they're going to do and how they're going to work and what's the most important, that wouldn't have ever had a chance using the traditional methods. And so you get more participation, you can get people engaged. And I really like the idea, especially in a large organization. I like the concept of the PI event, the planning increment event, where you're going to go out and plan out what you're going to do for the next 3 months. Trying to do that in a traditional project management approach or a traditional organization is sometimes really, really hard. And so from that aspect, I like SAFE as well. So that, just to summarize, right? SAFE is a scaling approach that you can use that will help an organization move forward and can help them on their Agile journey. And I'll reiterate this again. I'll maybe state that last sentence a little bit differently. SAFE can be a step on to an organization's Agile journey. It is not a plug and play for traditional project management. It's not a plug and play for traditional governance or for traditional top-down design or top-down decision making. It is something that organizations, especially larger organizations, tend to like because we walk in with a blueprint. Here's how this works. It's defined. We have specific roles. It's documented. There's millions of pages of documentation in the SAFE, on the SAFE website if you go and look at it. It's not hidden. It's all out there. It works and is a good, can be an easier sell than some of the other approaches to large organizations or to organizations that are having trouble scaling. It is not the end of the journey. It is merely one more step. And that's the way we approach it here at beLithe. Is SAFE is a tool that you can use as a stepping stone as you move forward. Some organizations will never be the lean startup type approach. A lot of organizations may not get there. SAFE is a way that they can start that journey and do it in an organized fashion. It is, again, it's not something that can be applied to every single solution, every single approach. And so that's all I've got for today. Are there any questions, Drew?
No, apparently everyone's questions they've ever had about SAFE have been completely wrapped up in the last 57 minutes. So Only Chris Daly could do such an epic thing. So thanks to Chris for presenting about SAFE today. We always like to say, as Chris mentioned, you know, we like to empower individuals and organizations on their journey. And I think as a part of that, if you are leaving today's webinar with more questions than answers, that's okay. You know, the goal of these webinars is to pique your interest, to give you a little bit more familiarity with it, and to entice you to learn more about what's going on with SAFE. So some shameless plugs on our end. So we have our next session coming up here for the hashtag Slinkythink sessions, and it's going to be hosted by yours truly. We're going to talk about retrospectives, to not get into the same rut week after week of doing the same thing, and how do you get your team to be really vulnerable with each other and to truly foster an environment of continuous improvement. So I'm actually going to go ahead and drop a link. Give me 1 second here. If you're interested in attending, we've actually not made this live yet. So you are the first group of folks to get the official link to attend. So I'm going to drop this in the chat right now. And if you'd like to attend, just go to Eventbrite. One thing I will notice, or excuse me, one thing I'll mention to you for this upcoming webinar is it's going to be at 1 o'clock, not at noon. So if you show up at noon, we appreciate your enthusiasm, but you'll be there about 60 minutes too early. So this will be at 1 o'clock on Wednesday, the 24th. So we hope to see you then. Once again, it's free from 1 to 2 o'clock. And lastly, because this is really the reason why you came for today's webinar, the results for the poll from earlier, and we have a tie for the winner. It's Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen and Stairway to Heaven by Led Zeppelin. I was talking to Todd earlier about my choices, and really I was curious to see if anybody picked La Macarena, because I would assume that there was something wrong with you in your head if you wanted to listen to the Macarena happen every single day for the rest of your life. So I'm glad nobody answered with La Macarena, although Africa Toto did come in second, which is exciting because that is my favorite karaoke song to sing. Anyways, enough about all that. We're going to go ahead and wrap up today's session. If you have any questions, obviously hit us up at info@beLithe.com, but also I will be sending a follow-up email with the video replay from today and some other relevant links as well. So thanks again for attending. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, and we will see you soon. Cheers.